Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's NAC at Home program. My name is Laura Daly, and I am co-chair of NAC's Dance Committee. Tonight, the acclaimed Korean-American choreographer Dana Tai Soon Burgess will share with us how his worldview and multifaceted background drives his creativity. For those of you not familiar with the National Arts Club, we are a 501c3 nonprofit based in New York City. Our mission is to stimulate, foster, and promote public interest in the arts. To this end, the club offers more than 150 free programs annually to the public. These include lectures, readings, exhibitions, theatrical, musical, and dance performances. If you would like to know more about the club, you can visit us at nationalartsclub.org or find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. This event will be recorded and posted within 48 hours on the NAC's YouTube channel for you to share with your friends or just to watch again. Mr. Burgess was the Smithsonian's first ever choreographer in residence and has toured around the world as a cultural ambassador for the U.S. State Department. He is the recipient of the 2021 Selma Jean Cohen Fulbright Dance Lecture Award, as well as 2 senior Fulbrights. He is celebrating his 30th anniversary as artistic director of his dance company, which is based in DC. Tonight, he will discuss his memoir, Chino and the Dance of the Butterfly, which is informed by his early years in Santa Fe, New Mexico. It is an insightful journey into an artist's process, inspired by varying cultural perspectives, stories, and experiences. I will include links to purchase the book in the chat box, as well as a link to Dana's company so you can learn more about them as well. There will be a Q&A after the presentation, so please feel free to use the Q&A function for any questions that you might have. Now, please welcome Dana Tai Soon Burgess.
Oh, thank you so much, Laura.
You're very welcome.
Beautiful introduction. And I also want to thank Nadine, who has been helping us with tech support and walking me through things. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. And when I was thinking about speaking to everyone tonight, the thing that came to mind first was how and why did I start and write a memoir? And what happened was during the great quieting, as we call it, of the COVID epidemic, I went from having this very, very vibrant dance career, being at the studio constantly, running to meeting after meeting, and suddenly everything just shut down. And I had this quiet moment in which I started to reflect, which I think all of us in a way did, about our lives, about how did I get here, who was important, and why had I pursued a career in dance and the arts. And that's really what started my journey of writing this memoir. So I wanted to start this evening, since we're talking about dance, with some dance. So I'm going to switch to a share screen, and I'll be walking and talking with you through a PowerPoint for a little while. This is the cover of the book and, of course, the back jacket. But let's start with some dance. So I started thinking about this idea of when does the moment of knowing that one is going to be an artist occur? And I started thinking about, from a movement perspective, how when a child is held for the first time, that there is a message that is passed from body to body, from parent to child, from grandparent to child, from great-grandparent to child, of all of the unrequited dreams that these individuals had in their lives. And so I went back and I started thinking about the Korean side of my family. They arrived in 1903. This is my grandfather, Kang's passport. They arrived in 1903 on the Gaelic, which was the first steamship from Korea to Hawaii. They were escaping political oppression from the Japanese, and through a series of missionaries, were able to retrieve contracts to work on a plantation in Hawaii. And they ended up being part of the first 100 Korean families to move to America. The other side of my family came in 1904 on another steamship. But they worked for 3 generations on the Korean plantation in Hawaii. So they were working for Del Monte. And these are my grandparents. And as you can see, what I love about this photo is that you can see this connection between being Korean, but something shifting and changing, because you see the Hawaiian lei and you see the Western dress. My mom was born in Hawaii in 1930, and this is her, and she's a visual artist, and she becomes very, very important in the book because of her life, which I'll explain, and how she became an artist. She is one of 4 Asian American women who are brought to Cranbrook Arts Academy of Art in the early 1950s to study. And there she meets my father, who was from Albany, New York, and grew up in a German-speaking household, and was Irish and German and Scottish in background. And out of this marriage that essentially comes before the civil rights, they get married in the 1950s, my brother and I are born. So this is me on my 100th day Korean birthday, which is traditional. And I like this outfit. This is my brother and me as well. My parents moved across the country and were visual artists and academics in different universities, and finally decided to settle in Carmel Valley. And from Carmel Valley, they moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico, in order to just have a whole new life inspired by landscape and other friends who were from Cranbrook that had moved there. I grew up in a neighborhood called Casa Solana, or the place where the sun shines. And what's odd about the place where the sun shines is that it was built over a Japanese internment camp. And when I was a young child and I found out for the first time about the camp, I was just completely terrified and really thought, oh my gosh, your rights can be taken away for being Asian American. And that would form a very traumatic, I think, deep lasting thought about my identity and about security within my identity. I wanted to be an artist like my parents. My parents are both very successful visual artists, and yet I didn't have that ability. So one day I realized, oh, I want to be a pianist. And I write about this in the book. And so I announced to my parents, I would like to go to have piano lessons. And so a couple of days later, my father said, oh, get ready, wear something comfortable. We're going to go meet your new teacher. And I thought, yes, here comes my Liberace moment. But instead, my parents dropped me off at a martial arts dojo. And I think that they realized that I was inherently a mover, but also that the situation of where I was growing up in Santa Fe, before Santa Fe was this fashion runway sort of city. It was a dangerous place. It was a difficult place. to be Asian American. So I was a competitive martial artist as a child and a teenager. And one day my father said, "Oh, why don't you try and take a dance class?" And the first dance class that I took, I immediately knew that this was going to be it for me, that I definitely had found this confluence of movement and of both movement and artistry. So I studied dance at the University of New Mexico, and then left to the East Coast to dance for different companies. And very soon after leaving to the East Coast, I realized that there weren't that many roles for an Asian American male dancer. And so I started working with a group of Asian American friends, and we formulated a dance collective. And that little dance collective ended up becoming my company, which I grew over years of time. So these are examples of some of the photos of our early works. This is a work which is based on the Korean plantations. It's called Tracings, that opened the centennial in 2003 for the Kennedy Center to celebrate 100 years of Koreans to America. And as I was exploring this Asian American identity, and in retrospect, thinking about it, was really trying to find a sense of home and family on the East Coast, I started to research the first Asian American choreographer, Michio Ito. And Michio Ito was a teacher of Martha Graham. He had a studio over Carnegie Hall. He was this amazing Japanese artist who moved to America and then moved to Los Angeles and had a very, very vibrant studio and school and company there. But after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, he was repatriated to Japan. But the last place, serendipitously, that he lived in America was the Japanese internment camp that was underneath the neighborhood that I grew up in. So I studied with his students and carry on his repertoire as part of our repertoire. Most of the works are mine, but we do carry on the Michio Ito legacy as well. So I think it's so important to our Asian American arts identity. As I was building the company, something amazing happened. A visual artist named John Dreyfus approached me, and he was a sculptor here in the Washington area. And we started to collaborate with a lighting designer named Jennifer Tipton, who lives in New York City, and she designs lights for Paul Taylor and for Twyla Tharp and Robert Wilson, etc. And we started to create a series of sculpture and dance works. And this is another one of the pieces here, which were commissioned by the Kennedy Center and began to tour. And for me, it was this eye-opening moment where I realized that all of those moments as a child, watching my parents as visual artists create on the canvas and create in textiles, and sitting there watching that visual art and the movement of visual art made so much sense to me to combine the two. And I started a series of works that engaged video, that engaged large props, sculptures, paintings, etc. And I had another collaboration that was really important with the Nam June Paik Foundation. And so I worked with the Nam June Paik early videos on a series of dances as well. And that led me to starting to think about how to storytell within dance. And so I started creating works that were a little more personal. This is Charlie Chan and the Mystery of Love. And it's based on growing up in New Mexico in a Latino neighborhood, being Asian American. This work is entitled Becoming American, and it is about a friend of mine who is a Korean adoptee and the trials and tribulations that she went through in order to acculturate in America as a child. Um, that led me to other concepts of stories, and I wanted to share another little dance with you. This is a work that I created that is based on the life of Sylvia Plath. What happened in my aesthetic is that I started thinking as as the presence of Asian Americans became stronger in Washington, D.C., I started thinking about the universality of storytelling and the universality of all of humanity's stories, that we all seek a place to be safe, a place to call home, a place to dream. And so it started to like open up the concept of how I was building repertory. So it wasn't just about the Asian American aesthetic, but it was really about what are the things that connect us all. This photo is from a work entitled Confluence. Confluence became an important work for me because in 2015, the Smithsonian asked me to come to the National Portrait Gallery because they were having the first exhibition on dance called Dancing the Dream. And they had a photo of me in the collection, and they said that they would just like to talk to me about what could I do with actual dancing, because they had all the images of dancing, but they actually didn't have dance there. So I suggested that we could be in resident if they would build a dance studio in one of the galleries for us. And they did that. And I was able to, for a year, respond to that exhibit and create works like Confluence. And that led me to working with other museums as well, creating different dances. And one of the major dances I also created this time was called Revenant Elegy, and it was for the National Gallery of Art in relation to a major exhibition on Diaghilev and the Ballet Russe. So I started working more and more in museums, and what ultimately occurred was that I was asked to be the choreographer in residence for the Smithsonian, and a position was created for me, and because it had never been done before.
A choreographer is a dance maker. Essentially, it's an individual that utilizes movement of the human body and steps in order to tell a story. And often that story is created with music, with a theme, with costumes. I'm able to use all of those things, create a movement language, and then make a unique dance that I hope people will respond to. My goal as a choreographer is to illuminate the different emotional journeys that we all go on. Movement itself is this fundamental universal language because we all understand when someone's depressed, or we understand when someone is elated, and we all tell stories of love and of death and of happiness. There's something about the human condition itself all across the globe that understands those stories when told through dance. This work is based on an exhibition, The Face of Battle, America at War, 9/11 to now. And it really focuses on the American experience for veterans. So I was especially moved by the portraits by Louis Palou, whose images of soldiers in Iraq and Afghanistan very much showed what a toll that experience takes on an individual. One of the things that became so apparent was just how young these individuals were, and yet how hardened and almost emotionally aged that they looked also. When I looked at the images, spoke to some of the artists, and also took the time to speak to veterans who had returned and live here in Washington, D.C., I realized that a major issue is post-traumatic stress disorder, and how to portray that through movement really became the challenge of the dance itself.
So I started working within the National Portrait Gallery, creating works there, responding to different exhibitions. And so for 7 years, I was able to work with curators, historians, artists, and their sitters as well, to create 2 to 3 major works per year. Along the way, I also created works that were very much about Americana. This is a collaboration that I did with NASA, which is called We Choose to Go to the Moon. And this is us within the museum just warming up. This is a work that I did at the Corcoran Gallery of Art. When we performed at the Smithsonian, we're often at the Kogod Courtyard, which it looks like this when it has an audience in it. This is a work called Margin. This is a work entitled Silhouettes, which was based on silhouette making, early silhouette making from the 1700s in America. And I started a series of works based on social justice icons. And this is an excerpt from a tribute to Marian Anderson. This is a work which was based on an exhibition about the Civil War, actually. This was the work that you heard about earlier in the video about 1001 Nights. We often take works that are incubated at museums when I'm working there into theaters. So we'll take them to the Kennedy Center and tour them. This is actually one of my newest works. It's called El Muro, and it deals with questions about the southern border wall. So El Muro in Spanish means the wall. One thing that I've done for decades is work with the US State Department. So I tour with them abroad, bringing not only the company and performance, but also teaching classes and working with local communities. This is Xiamen, China. This was us in Cusco, Peru. This was a recent performance in late 2019, I believe it was, in Cambodia. This was a project we did in southern India in Chennai. And one of the really wonderful things that happened was in my career was that we were invited to perform at the White House for Asian History Month by President and Mrs. Obama. And I still continue to have a strong relationship with the State Department and with diplomacy. This is recently at Vice President Harris's home. And I'm kind of bring everything back to a full circle in a sense, because this work that we did a few years ago is about my family's coming to America, being on the plantations. And this is actually my mom, who has a walk-on role. So every once in a while she gets to tour with us, which is quite amazing as well. One thing that was so unique about growing up with artist parents in Santa Fe, and why being in a museum situation feels so comfortable, is that I had these different experiences as a child because of being part of this unique Asian American community. So I had dinner several times with Isamu Noguchi. I knew his sister Ilis, who danced for Martha Graham. We were good friends with Toshiko Takaezu, who is a major ceramicist in America. So we were just constantly surrounded by these conversations, and I grew up around those conversations about dance, movement, and of course, visual arts. One of the things that I do as well as the dance company is I'm the host of Slant Podcast, where I interview Asian American artists across the nation as well. This is a history book, Milestones in Dance History, which came out last year also, which is one of my books. And of course, this is the cover of Chino and the Dance of the Butterfly. There are many unique stories within the book, which are very, very personal. They're personal about not just growing up in Santa Fe as an Asian American in a very Latino Catholic neighborhood, but also trying to maneuver an understanding of my own sexuality as a gay man, of building a career as a dancer, and then moving into becoming a choreographer, and then building an actual dance company. And there's lots of travel adventure in it as well because of all the tours we've taken. So I think you'll really enjoy that too. And this is where the book is available. One thing I'd like to do, and just like one little minute or two, so I wanted to just read you a passage from the book. And this is just so that you understand what Santa Fe was when I was growing up. It's called La Iglesia. The Santa Fe of my childhood was not yet the Hollywood branded version that it was to become. The year 1973 marked the beginning of a financial recession. It was 8 years before Ralph Lauren would launch his Santa Fe fashion and home decor line, a decade before actor Val Kilmer would begin popping up at restaurants, and 20 years before actress and best-selling memoirist Shirley MacLaine felt the radiating crystal energy of the land and chronicle sightings of UFOs from her Santa Fe house on a hill. Santa Fe was a gritty southwestern town that was more like a sprawling pueblo. For lack of upkeep, flat roofs sagged on adobe homes, low-rider cars prowled dirt roads that branched off main streets, and tumbleweeds blew and fastened onto barbed wire fences where they would dry to a crisp. Santa Fe was a city with little economy and the pressures of 3 prominent cultures that were sometimes at odds: Indigenous, Hispanic, and Caucasian. Their relationships to the land were also varied. Although Santa Feans spoke with pride about the tres visiones, the 3 visions, as a braided community, in fact, the city was built on hundreds of years of conquest and conflict, land disputes, clashes of religion. And on the main plaza, I sometimes saw children mock the glottal sounds of the native people's language. I hid behind my mother when we walked downtown. I thought it better not to be seen, to be disregarded as interlopers until I understood this strange new terrain. I just wanted to share that with you. So if you have questions, I would love to answer them and explain a little bit more about the book and see what your thoughts are.
Thank you, Dana. That was absolutely wonderful. There are a few questions.
Yes.
So it seems as if you started out with feelings of being an outsider,
Mm-hmm.
then morphed into a level of empathy, which caused you to see the universality of people's experiences.
Absolutely, Laura. I
When
mean,
did that happen? When did that light come on?
You're so astute in seeing that. You know, I think when I create work now, it really is all about trying to figure out, well, what are some of the voices from the periphery and how can I bring that to the center of what we're viewing and what we're thinking about? You know, for me, I think it was an ongoing struggle because I always felt like an outsider. You know, I never quite fit in. And I think being biracial also puts you in this strange place that's a hyphen. And sometimes that hyphen connects Asian and American, and sometimes it disconnects it. So I think my whole life has been about trying to figure out how to find a community, a place to call home in order to feel the safety of being a creative. But I think maybe it didn't happen until just a few years ago. I mean, all the elements were happening. You know, I was touring, I was understanding more of what artists faced around the globe, how we were similar, how we were connected. But I think it wasn't until I actually met my husband and was able to fully embrace marrying a man and feeling comfortable in myself fully, not just as an artist, but also within my sexuality, and finding somebody that completely believed in everything that I did. And I think sometimes love is the ultimate healing factor that makes one whole.
That's great. I do want, but we have other questions, but I do want to say that the Marian Anderson clip was fabulous. And, you know, the National Arts Club bestows medals of honor for those artists who excel in their art form. And in 1989, we gave Marian Anderson a Medal of Honor for outstanding achievement in music. So,
Oh,
you know,
that's a beautiful connect.
very nice
Yeah,
coincidence.
thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it was really wonderful. So when you were training as a dancer, for the choreographers you were looking at who moved you? And to that, I would also say, not just choreographers, composers, sculptors. It looks like you have numerous muses.
Right. It was interesting growing up in Santa Fe. It was before the internet. So getting information there was very, very difficult because we were so far away from both coasts of the United States. And the modern dance and the ballet community predominantly is on the East Coast. You have the film industry on the West Coast. And so I really relied on these different artists that were coming through on tour sporadically. And I had these wonderful, so, you know, some of them were like the Nikolai Company came through. Let's see, there were like so many, Bill T. Jones came through, you know, lots of different artists when back in the early 80s were coming through there. But when I think about it in retrospect, my teachers at the University of New Mexico were phenomenal. And Jennifer Predock-Linnell and Judith Benaham, they both danced for Anthony Tudor, and they were both quite amazing ballerinas. And I think that their introduction for me to start to understand musicality and music and storytelling because of their interest in Tudor was very important. And of course, learning the Michio Ito technique, the Dalcrozian music accomplishments that he had were really helpful. And then what happened was I was invited to go to Hamburg, Germany, and ended up working at the Ballet Hamburg school. And so John Neumeyer, who was the director there at the time, he asked me to come and choreograph on his advanced students as they were going into being apprentices in the company, and to teach classes. And to be around John Neumeyer's creative process was extremely important to me as a young artist also. Yeah.
Speaking of being influenced by touring companies, where will the company be performing in the following months? And by the way, everybody, in the chat box is a link to Dana's company, which should have a list of upcoming performances. But Dana, you can do a little promo here.
We will be, I have to think for a moment because we do so much all the time.
But your company manager might know more about that.
Right. We will be in the fall. We'll be at the Krieger Museum, which is this amazing jewel box of a museum. It's this private museum that one of the founders of Geico created, insurance. It's phenomenal. It's full of Picassos and Monets. And then we will be at the Kennedy Center in November. In October, we'll be at Towson University, and then we'll be at the Baltimore Museum of Art. And then next year, fairly early in the year, we'll be at the Noguchi Museum and also the Longhouse Reserve in the Hamptons in the summer. Yeah.
That's great. Looking at all of the video that you showed, it seemed that your choices of music are also integral to your choreography. So, you know, if you could just talk about your relationship between the music and your movements.
Sure. We nowadays usually have live music. So I did a work recently dedicated to Maya Lin, and we had a tenor, a soprano, a cellist, a pianist, and we had 4 musicians. And the El Moro piece had a band, a Latin band actually, of 7 people. So music for me is very, very important because of that relationship, I think, of how it kinesthetically moves the audience and moves the dancer and enlivens everything, especially live music. I love playing with musicality because it will, it can define the movement. It can create an environment for the dance to reside within. And so I'm always looking for different compositions. The thing that I find often is that younger choreographers aren't paying much attention to music, or musicality isn't taught as much. And I think it's almost becoming a lost art. And I hope that it has a renaissance, because I believe that's what brings the whole piece together. Yeah.
Well, you will be a part of that, I am sure. Now, let's see. One of the attendees, he would love to hear more about how your martial arts background affects your choreography, because he said he thought he saw some moves that are reminiscent of martial
Right, right.
arts in the
Yeah.
opening piece.
Mhm. I often think that martial arts is my first dance training, because it's so disciplined. And the dojo that I went to, I write about it in the book. I sort of had this Mr. Miyagi, before the Karate Kid was a movie, mentor, who really trained me from a small child upwards to meditate, to how to focus, how to be disciplined in class. And all of those things are dance, right? And so I think I utilize the focus and sometimes even the legwork of martial arts within my pieces. And I love to blend that. The great thing about modern dance is that it sort of can absorb all different movement styles, and you can be so creative with it. And I like that.
Any plans ever to perform at the Joyce?
We don't have plans as of now, but yeah, you never know. I know we'll be at the new Korean Cultural Center next year. They're building a new space, but I'm not sure yet. Yeah, you never know.
I'll have to hook you up to them. They'll have to
Oh,
come,
thank you.
they'll have to
That'd be
come
great.
see you. They have to come see you. There are more questions. Well, this is a somewhat of a personal one, but here goes. How did you
Sure.
and your husband meet? Was he a dancer? Is he a dancer as well?
Oh, great question. Well, he took classes at Nutmeg Ballet in Connecticut when he was younger, and
Where my son started.
oh my gosh, that's so great. And he played Fritz for many years in the Nutcracker. And but but we actually, I write about this in the book. So much of my life is about serendipity. I couldn't plan a thing, that unfolded in such profound ways for me. But I was just driving a friend of mine as designated driver, as one should have on their birthday, and her group of friends. And literally I parked and I saw him across the street, and I thought, this person has a nimbus, looks like he had like this halo around him. And I thought, I think I just need to talk to him. So we literally just met on the street. And it was just so funny. We've been together ever since, for over a decade now.
That's great. That's great. Let's see. I think there is one more question. Well, we will end on a positive note, but let's just backtrack a little. The current mood in this country is not particularly enamored of of Asians in general, and it's just
Mm,
very disheartening of all of the violence that's being perpetrated. But it seems as if a lot of your choreography sort of addresses it, but
uh-huh.
are you in the process of maybe thinking about addressing it more directly in some of future work, or how?
Yes. I have a new work that the Kennedy Center will be producing, which looks at the history of Asian Americans from sort of different perspectives. So I'm just starting to research that work now. But the reason I started my podcast, Slant Podcast, also was so that I could have another platform in which people could hear about the diverse stories of different Asian Americans. Like, we're such a diverse group of people, it's like Vietnamese American, Korean American, Chinese American, and we sort of get lumped together as Asian American for census counts or something, and yet I think the more that people understand how what our experiences are, then they will become more empathetic. One thing that even within my family history, a lot of times people don't realize that Koreans had very, very hard lives on plantations in the early 1900s. And even my mother, who's 95 now, she picked plantations. So she would have been a third generation person that worked in those plantation situations, and, she grew up with, not wearing shoes, and, going to one house, one room, schoolhouses, things like that. And it's not that far or long ago. And yet somehow the history of Asian America isn't really understood. It's not taught in textbooks. It's sort of, you have to seek it out, there's a lot of assumption.
Yeah, and it's true. It's all lumped into one box. The nuances,
Right.
between all the different cultures really is not anything that's addressed. It's somewhat similar to like Mexicans and South Americans. It's like just this big
There's this monolith.
thing,
Uh-huh.
which of
Right.
course is not that's not the case at all.
Mm-hmm.
There is one, not a question, but a comment here. I think
Mhm.
you'll like it. It says, your mother is so striking. She has the spine of a dancer.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I will tell her.
So for all of that, pineapple picking, it did, yes. But
I'll
also
tell
like,
her.
whoa,
Yeah. Well, art heals all. She makes her art every single day
yeah,
still.
she looks very
And
stately, I must say, in that chair. She's just has that aura,
oh, I
that
love that.
certain
Yeah.
stage presence, just being still. It's it's quite a feat.
Thank you.
Awesome. So I know that when you read your excerpt that Santa Fe, although people see it in very romantic terms or very fashionable terms, to be honest, my husband worked for a guy who owned the company and had more money than God and had the largest home in the state, and it was in Santa Fe. And when he married his second wife, he
Uh-huh.
brought us all down for a week, and they
Uh-huh.
had flamenco dance. It was like this huge hacienda. I just could
Uh-huh.
not even, but then we went on these walks where you could see, all the geography, which is very dramatic, very
Right.
dramatic. So,
Right.
um, so was any of the topography of the area,
Mhm.
inspiring to you?
Yeah, I definitely think so. And especially within the works that I've done in which I'm working with large sculptures. There's something about the way, and I talk about it in the book, it's like as a child, my parents would say, okay, well, go and, have fun in nature and just get home
Or
before
yeah,
sunset, and nowadays you would never just sort of send a child out into nature. And yet, you know, learning about all the different animals in nature, the way a chamisa bush moves in the wind, the relationship of how the sun moves across the sky and the shadows that it casts, I think that all became my theatricality,
yeah.
and I think when you see the works I do in person, people really can understand that, and I look at a landscape, definitely like it's a stage, just like I often look at the stage as a canvas and the dancers as, these moving brush strokes across a landscape. Mm.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, this was fantastic. Everybody get the book and check out Dana's website to see what the company is up to. It's just a gem, just wonderful, wonderful. And I
Oh, thank
so
you.
much for this presentation. It was really fascinating. And to all our attendees tonight, thank you so much for being part of this event. And again, within 48 hours, this will be uploaded to the National Arts Club YouTube page. So watch it again or share it with your friends. And Dana, just let me know when you're in town next and we'll have dinner. We have a lot of just a lot of connections that
Oh, it's great. It's
haven't
great,
even hit
definitely.
upon yet. So it'll be fun.
Thank you
So
so much.
Well, thank you. And thanks to everybody. And have a wonderful evening, everyone.